Hi, my name is Avi Avital. I play the mandolin, and I welcome you to listen to this conversation where I'll be sharing some thoughts about music and about my work. My desk is always piled with new things to do with music, but I think the most exciting coming up project for me is my new ensemble. It's called the Between Worlds Ensemble, which taps into a theme that is kind of a motive in everything, almost everything that I do or that interests me in my musical path, which is always this kind of non-existing border between musical genres, and especially between traditional music, folk music, and art music, concert music, what we call classical music. There was a stream of composers in the beginning of 20th century that tackled it a little bit. They took music that was part of their folk tradition and made it into classical music, into concert hall music by reharmonizing and restructure it. Composers like Bela Bartok or the Spanish Manuel de Falla, Ravel even, and this exercise of taking something that is ancient, that is traditional, that is passed through generations, and to make out of it music for concert hall was interesting for me. And I think in our days, we're in 21st century, we have access to all the music in the world. In 2 clicks, we have all the traditional music from any corner of the earth. I think this becomes again interest of like what do you do with it? How do you filter? Or how do you kind of blur these separations between folk music and classical music, and the experience of going to a concert hall, experiencing something new within a context of an art experience, art music experience, is the key of this ensemble. So this ensemble, in other words, will play classical music that is influenced by folklore, but rearranged for instruments that are more folkloristic. The mandolin itself already gives it a very folkloristic spice, but also the percussions and other instruments. Through the arrangements, also will collaborate with real traditional musicians, a flamenco singer from Spain, a polyphonic vocal group from Georgia, musicians from South Italy, they play pizzica, and so on. So this is at the moment the most exciting project I'm working on. Every project, it's like starting from scratch. After every album that I've recorded, I have this moment where everything is blank, and I'm like, okay, and now what? I feel that also as a mandolin player, as a classical mandolin player, I don't have this repertoire that the pianists have or that the violinists have, that you just need to choose whatever you want to play next year. It's always requires arranging and also choosing. Not every piece that is written for the violin can be adapted for the mandolin. The mandolin itself, it doesn't have a lot of repertoire in the classical music. So and there is an added burden, there is an added responsibility because I play an unusual instrument, and because the people that come on the concert hall, most of them don't know the mandolin so much, and I kind of have to, I feel that it's on my responsibility, it's on my shoulders to convince them to love the mandolin and to be attached to the sound of the mandolin immediately. So I feel there is a lot of responsibility when I craft a project, when I choose the repertoire, how I play it, how I arrange it. Not every piece in the world, of course, is fitting for that. And you have to kind of bind the pieces together to create a narrative, a dramaturgy, So it's always a really big creative moment to craft one of these projects. How I choose the repertoire? I think first of all I have to like the piece of music. I have to have the feeling that I have something to say about it. It has to fit the mandolin. It has to have a meaning, an added value when played on the mandolin. So, for example, the mandolin is tuned like the violin. That makes a lot of the violin repertoire playable on the mandolin, possible to play on the mandolin. But I also always have to ask myself, why should the people listen to it on a mandolin and not on the original version on the violin? And there are many answers to that, luckily. For example, it could be something that I have with extremely famous pieces like the Four Seasons or some of the concerti by other concertos by Vivaldi or by Bach, that is such a familiar music, and kind of everyone knows this music, and everyone comes to the concert hall already with their version of the original violin sound in the head. So suddenly playing it on another instrument, on the mandolin, gives you a fresh perspective on the music that you know very well. Maybe an opportunity to rediscover it, to listen to it from a slightly different angle. This I found very intriguing also for me, and also the reaction of the public when I play. Again, for example, the Four Seasons, everyone knows it, everyone has their, whether you want or not, you heard it for hundreds of times during your life, in the car, on the, in the mall, on waiting to get an appointment. But I realized that suddenly playing it on a mandolin squeezed out something else out of the piece. Definitely a new listening experience for the audience, maybe something more Italian, maybe something a bit more raw than the violin sound that we are used to. This would be, for example, one reason why I think I play this, I choose a certain piece to play on the mandolin. I think also well, in other cases, I think the mandolin, just the very exposed and the very immediate sound of it evokes something more, sometimes pure even, less pretentious, less grand than probably the original instrument that it was written to. And also the mandolin holds within itself a lot of associations, right? So everyone has kind of an imagination of what is the mandolin, or the sound of a plucked string can evoke associations, many different associations in different people. Also depends on the tradition or the culture they come from. For example, the mandolin is a part of a bigger family, the plucked strings instrument. And the sound of a plucked string is very familiar. In every culture in the world, there is a plucked string instrument that is kind of the main role in that respective culture. Would be the balalaika in Russia, or the bouzouki in Greece, or the oud in Arabic music. The sound of the guitar is so familiar. Every house has a guitar, or now ukulele hang on the wall. It is very intuitive concept, the plucked string. So it makes it a very popular kind of family of instruments that cross centuries, eras, and countries and cultures. So that's why when I play on the mandolin, I feel that it embeds all this, bank of metaphors, of associations, of references for the listener. For example, if I play a piece by Rachmaninov that is maybe originally written for piano or violin, on the mandolin it would sound suddenly much more Russian, because the sound of the tremolo and the sentimental sound of the mandolin in this context would remind maybe a Russian song played on a balalaika. Same thing when I play Vivaldi, suddenly the folkloristic sound of the mandolin in the context of the Napolitan folk song or the tarantella, that you associate the sound of the mandolin. Suddenly when you apply it on Vivaldi's music sounds more Italian, more folkloristic in this way. It just adds another bit of reference, of association to the experience. I think this is the magic that the mandolin has. It has another layer of references in the musical interpretation. Every collaboration with a different artist I see as an opportunity to learn something new, to grow. And I feel like with every encounter with another musician, I take a lot, I learn a lot. I mean, it's obvious. We share something in common, is that the development of a very complex craft, with life experience, with stage experience, with musical experiences that we have cultivated and collected in our kind of invisible backpack throughout the years. So any encounter of that and the conversation and the things we can learn from each other are really nourishing, right? So the more that particular collaborator is different than myself, comes from a different musical genre, has a different musical upbringing, the better it is for me, the more I can learn, the more the contrast you have on the big thing that you have in common, which is being a musician, the more I learn, the more it challenges everything that I know about music and the way I live it. So this collaboration, I always feel like after a project with a musician that I'm a better musician, that I'm more rich, that my backpack now has some new tricks and insights inside it. So, for example, one of my recent years collaborations which were very fruitful for me was with the bass player, the jazz musician and bass player Avi Avital. We share the same family name, but we're not related. But we have a lot in common. I mean, he's a jazz musician. My education was classical, so we met. When we met, we were still kind of, the jazz musician, the classical musician are interested very much in each other's worlds, but without too much experience. At the same time, we also had a lot in common, and we have a lot in common. Our mutual family name, Avital, is also kind of a cultural capsule, because this surname is typical for Jewish Moroccan families. My parents came from Morocco to Israel in the 60s. Also, Omer's parents came from Morocco to Israel. They changed the surname from Abutbul, which is the original version of the name, to Avital, to have a more Israeli sounding name, to be more integrated in the newly created Israeli society in Israel of the 60s. So there is this drama between, of my family, the generation of our parents, of like, okay, this was our culture for that many generations, but now we put it a bit aside because now we're concentrating in the new place, in Israel, in this new society, in this new culture. And our kids, so me and Omer and our generation, are going to grow into this multicultural new Israeli society, which is also a phenomena as its own. And so both of us culturally grew up in houses that celebrated the Moroccan culture, the cuisine, the music, the mentality. And at the same time, we're concentrating in being an Israeli and really defining what Israeli is. There was no the clear answer of what it is, but it was in the kind of in the making. This is a big thing to have in common with a musician that you share stage with, no matter if you play two different genres of music. So coming into this project, for example, we had no clue what it's going to turn out to. We just know that we want to work together because we liked each other's artistry. But very quickly it became kind of this looking back and questioning our cultural identity as Israelis, as kids to Moroccan parents, Sephardic Jews, our generation, you know, we grew up in the 80s in Israel, all these things that were common in our identity came into this project, and actually that was a stronger part than me being more classical, he's being more jazz. That became a natural thing. So of course I learned a lot from this project. I developed a lot. It kind of forced me to write, to compose, to improvise much more than I normally do. And so in collaborations, I would always seek this kind of encounters. At the end, every musician, every artist has, you know, brings into the project all his life experience. And it's just about getting in the rehearsal room and wait for these life experiences to interact. And there's always, fair enough, there's always a blossom, there's always a big bang coming out of these encounters. There's still a very different approach into classical music versus folk music. And I look at folk musicians always with slight envy, because you know, when you see an Indian sitar player, you know, playing raga, there are generations of experience, of evolution, of tradition that is maintained, that is very deep, the nuances, the you know, the dialect at the end, which is different than a classical musician that is based on a different art form, a different traditional art form, but the one that you have a score, and your role as a musician is to interpret and to kind of generate the experience that was composed by someone else, by a composer. I like to believe that all these different genres of music, at the end, those are dialects of the same language. The language is music. Now, there are many ways to create a musical experience. There are many dialects or other languages to create an excitement, to create an artistic experience that lives on a timeline, which is which is music. So between jazz or Indian music or classical music, there are elements which are universal that I believe that everyone in any culture could understand. You don't have to know a certain type of music. You don't have to be an expert of classical music, as well as you don't have to be an expert of raga, Carnatic Indian music to enjoy it. Of course, people that have lived Carnatic Indian music for generations, they would be more sensitive to nuances that maybe I'm deaf to. But there is still a very, very strong universal element in it. So whether it's jazz or classical music or folk music that I play, I always try to find what is this? What's the universal? What are the exciting elements? What are the elements that I can play to whoever person in the world of any age that would still move and generate for them this artistic experience. I think, the good classical pieces already embed within themselves, of course, in the structure, in the composition, melodically, harmonically, rhythmically, this message. So my role as an interpreter is just to kind of take this text and generate it to the audience, exactly like a jazz musician or a sitar player from India or oud player from Egypt and so on. So in this sense, there is no difference. I'm very much attached to my role as a musician, as someone who is there to generate an experience to live audience. This is where I see myself. This is my natural habitat, and I feel sometimes sometimes you have it, especially now with the pop culture, it's easy to flip. It's a very slippery slope to flip this kind of relationship with the audience the other way, because some people might have the illusion that the audience is coming to the concert to hear me, and then they clap to me, and this is kind of my fuel. And for me, it's just the opposite. And it is important for me to remember that every time I go on stage. They're not here for me. I'm here for them. I mean, the audience comes to the concert hall to experience something beautiful, spiritual, artistic, you name it. And my role at that moment is to be the shaman of the situation, to generate this experience to them. So it's not about me. I'm the tube. I am not important like the eye. And I think this is for me so important, that I remember, that I connect to this part of my role. It's like a rabbi or a priest, It's not, they cannot make the service about themselves. No, it's about connecting. At the end, in my belief, the people to themselves, to their spirit, to something spirit that they experience, something religious, but that uplifts their spirit. Fine. I feel that my role in a concert hall is similar. At the end, people are coming open to experience the music, and the music is a mean to experience something beautiful and spiritual, and I'm there to make it happen. I do like to record, of course. It's a different, almost a different profession or a feeling when you record music, not to live audience. But people often ask me, you have the piece, it's written by Bach, Vivaldi, Brahms, whoever. Is it not every night the same? Of course, it's not every night the same. Everyone I guess, knows that. So what is it that it makes a difference? And I think in classical music, it's not so visual, but the audience actually has a very active role. They're very active participants in the way that the evening is conducted, the music is played even. Just to illustrate, when my son was born and he was very little, maybe when he was 1 or something like that. You have this game that you play with babies. No? It's called, it has different names in different cultures, but I think in English it's called peekaboo. It's the one that you uncover your face and then you reveal it, and then usually the baby laughs, right? So this is a very simple exercise of creating tension and releasing the tension, creating a relief, yeah? Which is the building blocks of music in the micro and in the macro and in the micro, and the bar, the phrase, the movement, the piece, the symphony, harmonically, rhythmically, melodically, there's always creating tension and then coming to a catharsis, resolving this tension. The resolution affects you. It really creates a physical reaction. So in this case, the baby would laugh. Now, how do you play peekaboo? This is exactly like a musical piece, all right? You have the instructions, you have the composed piece, what the composer brewed, designed, the construction of a very complex, insightful structure of tension and release that are supposed to evoke emotions, feelings, atmospheres, and the experience, all right? But this peekaboo is really, I think it's really so simple to understand what is the role of the performer. So if you go to Google and type, how do I play peekaboo? The instructions would be 1, find the baby, 2, cover your face with your hands. So the baby feels the tension. Where is daddy? Where is mommy? 3, uncover your face. So great relief. And asterisk, the baby should laugh now. You know, this is this is the sign that you performed it well, because this is the kind of reaction that the baby would have from this tension. Now, okay, the performer now needs to perform it. And I remember practicing with my kid, how long can I continue to play this game before it's getting boring? Because of course, after 2 times or 3 times, even the baby figures out, okay, you know, I know these are the hands, but behind these hands, my dad is still there. So the tension is not so tense and the relief is not so great. So how do you do it? How do you keep on the context of playing it once, twice, 3 times? Of course, the 3rd time, you cannot repeat exactly the same thing. You have to do something that the tension is greater, maybe wait a little bit more, but not too much, because then you lost the context. Maybe then the baby is interested in something else that happens in the room and making it a relief, but not like the expected thing that you did now twice. Maybe pop your head from a different angle or make another sound. You know, so this is all kind of ways to interpret the structure, the simple structure of tension and relief to the baby in order to generate this experience, yeah? And what if you play it not with 1 baby? What if you have 10 babies and you have to do the same kind of game, the same kind of performance, or 1,000 babies in a stadium? And how old are they? And how experienced are, how this is the first time ever they have this game performed to them, or they're already done it 1,000 of times. So all these kind of inputs a performer on the stage needs to process in real time. I interpret the written music, but how far can I go? How piano can I go? How forte can I go? How much time can I wait before giving the note that is the resolution? How much rubato can I take? How fast or how slow should I play the piece? This is all things that are unconsciously processed in the moment where you sit in front of the audience. The audience gives you the feedback. I'm with you. You can take me now here. You can take me there, or not. Or you have to work on like bring, everyone together till you can really play the music and take it to extremes. So that's what makes it every evening different, of course. It depends on the architecture and how many people are there, and how even it depends on, it's even the preparation before even I play the first note. Is the ceremony. It's how I walked on stage, how I bowed, how the people react, the clap, this 3 seconds of silence before the first note is played. Cultivating this silence. All these things that that as a performer I need to take, I need to consider, this is the input, and that would influence how I, at the end, perform the piece. Recording an album is therefore a different story. So, of course, starting with a lot of the excitement is built in the composition. This is something that the composer brewed or kind of designed in the recipe that they left for us, the musicians. The recording has, in one hand, an unnatural kind of situation for performing music that is supposed to be performed live, but at the same time, this is not, when I listen to recordings or when I record myself, I don't feel there is a compromise on that. It's just a different, you play it a bit differently. You play it for the record. So starting with how you project the music, I always think when I record an album, I bear in mind that I'm no longer in the big hall. The projection of the sound is not the one that is required in a big hall. I'm playing usually to like this membrane of a microphone that is, this close to me. And I always like to imagine that people sometimes, they hear the music in their earbuds, in their headphones, and you kind of you're so close. You play, it's like you whisper to their ears, the music. So even if it's a forte, it's not the one that has to kind of grab the last row in the audience, but it's the one, it's the kind of forte, the kind of intensity that needs to like grab you, but from closer. And I think because usually a record, especially a recording that I like, I listen to it more than once. There is an opportunity to add so much more detail and nuance than you would do in a concert hall. So, for example, if I'm in a concert hall situation, and I plan to do, let's say I play a piece by Bach, and there is this point where I say to myself, this would be nice to bring to a really, like an extreme pianissimo moment. So, of course, before that, I need to brew the audience, so when this moment arrives, they are really surprised and moved. So, in other words, if I every 4 bars do a very, very extreme pianissimo, it will lose the effect. I need to kind of do something maybe very monotonic or very boring before that, so when this moment comes, it suddenly pulls your attention in a greater way. I feel that in a recording, because you listen to the same track many times, you have much more opportunity to add these nuances and these extreme moments. When I record Baroque, for example, in Baroque music, there is the part of the basso continuo, that's the part where the instruments like the harpsichord or the lute, there is not a written part by the composer, but it's just a harmony. Like in a rock band, you have chords, you have the charts, and kind of the guitar player would decide whether to play these kind of patterns of chords or that kind of pattern or what kind of chords and so on. So it's similar in Baroque. There is a freedom to the basso continuo players that provide the harmony to invent, according to their taste, the kind of rhythmical patterns or the chords that I would choose to use, when to play, when not to play, the ornaments. Even for the other players, for the melodic line, in the Baroque there is this allowance to decorate, to make your own ornaments, which are different from musician to musician and different from performer to performer, a little bit like improvisation. And always when I record Baroque, when I record Vivaldi, I would, first of all, myself, I would put much more ornaments and like improvised variations than I would normally do in a concert hall situation. And I would then also ask from the lute player, from the harpsichord player, to put more, to invent more inner lines, decorations, ornaments, chords, arpeggi, just to add much more information that would, in a situation of a concert, would sound too heavy, too much. But in a recording, it allows you, with every listening, to discover something new. Okay, you feel you know the music, and then this, like the fifth time you listen to the same track, you realize the lute is making like a really nice half a scale there that I didn't notice before. So this is something that, this is within the craft that is intentionally and consciously different in a recording situation than it is from an album, from a concert situation, than an album. The difference between recording and performing in a live concert situation is a little bit like the difference between theater and cinema. So theater works a lot with the energy on stage. The timing of the lines would be influenced by the reaction of the public, whether they laugh, whether they clap, how they react. It would conduct the pace, the timing of the performance. And also in theater, you would use big gestures to express emotions, while in cinema, it's all kind of under a magnified glass. I mean, every muscle in your face in a cinematic situation has an expression. Every move of your eyebrow can mean something if it's a close-up and if the editing is so. While in the theater, it's not. I mean, you don't see that. It's more the big gestures. And so I feel it's the same like in a recording. The recording is like a magnified glass. It's very exposed and it's very transparent. And you listen to the same thing, not once, hopefully, but many times. And you still have to create these expressions with the most delicate movements and nuances. As a musician, as a performing artist, the more experiences, the more artistic experiences you have, the better is. I think with every life experience that I have, I extract something that then would come out in the music. And it really can be anything. It can be any encounter, any exhibition or film or theater or dance show that I've experienced, that I can understand something about art making and take from it, extract from it what I can translate to my profession, and how do I evolve my music making. It can be even a walk in the mountains, or just being in nature. I think there is something about art in general that wants to imitate the divine, the absolute beauty. Now, what is the most beautiful thing that you cannot argue about is nature in our eyes. There are so many kinds of flowers. There are so many kinds of color combinations, of proportions, but I don't know any ugly flower, It's always the right, exactly the perfect color combination. It's always the perfect proportion. Have you seen an ugly mountain? Have you seen an ugly tree or an ugly river? It doesn't exist. This is the idea for us of the absolute beauty, the divine beauty. And I think there's always us, mortal creatures, always aspire to connect to this beauty. And this is something that in art, in the abstract way, one of the things is to kind of that composers, the creators try to get to is to touch, to get near this kind of level of beauty. So a walk in the mountains can be extremely influential and extremely inspiring afterward for playing music. You know that you have to find the universal elements in the music that would connect with everyone. Doesn't matter if they know or understand in music or not. When I look at the flower, I'm not a botanist, I'm not a biologist, I don't understand the flower. I just experience its beauty. And that's all I need. When it comes to composing, now I'm not that experienced in composing. I never defined myself as a composer. I just wrote a few things, so I think I have a different approach to it. I never would say to myself that this is like you are a composer. But what I did realize in my composition experience, and especially in one tune that I wrote for this project with Avi Avital, it's called, and I was encouraged, and I set to myself as a goal to compose something for that. And there was again a deadline that really forced me to produce something, despite my insecurities as a composer, right? So what I did realize is the real sense of the word composition, because it's not inventing from zero, it's taking bits and parts from different, again, musical experiences that you like, that you remember, that influenced you, and putting them together. Now, listening to the piece that I wrote, no one could never trace what exactly were the influences, but me that I know the process, I can tell you, this part comes from a moment, some bars in Philip Glass opera, Einstein on the Beach. Does it sound like Philip Glass? Not at all, absolutely not. But something in the movement of the violin there and the scale, kind of a twisted minor scale, influenced me to write these 10 bars of the tune. And then another Balkan music tune that I heard, and they gave me the inspiration for the specific meter, the specific rhythm that the piece has. Now, putting it together, you cannot anymore, when it's a composition, you cannot anymore put it apart and say, no, okay, of course, was Philip Glass and Balkan music together. No one can, if I don't explain it to you, you never get it yourself. But then I realized this is composition. This is like taking things and putting them together is the creative thing, is the process. And creating something new, but of course it's never from the absolute nothing. It's always from something. And it's always part of an evolution, because maybe then your creation would influence and evoke and inspire other people. As a kid, I didn't like to practice. not disciplined in this sense. I didn't have the pressure also from home, luckily, because it kept a very, I think, healthy and joyful and positive connection with music. But then I had to compensate later on. Growing up, I had to sit and solve some technical problems. That's for sure. But I think something that one of my teachers, Moti Schmidt in Jerusalem Music Academy, I came when I was 18, so I was still forming as a musician, of course. But there was time for a new input for me in the musical education, some kind of matureness that I was open to a new kind of input. And this teacher, Moti, he would always, in a very smart way, encourage me to broaden my experience in life. So, for example, I would go to him and I say, I want to learn this piece now by Bach. I even remember it was the second partita by Bach. And he would say no. Before we start to work on this piece, you need to read this book. And he gave me, I also remember the book, it was Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, which is still one of my favorite books. And before working on this piece, there is this exhibition, go to Jerusalem Museum and then come back, and then we can start to, now it has nothing to do, Bulgakov had nothing to do specifically with Bach's second partita, but it was his way to say, you have to experience and you have to understand even the mechanism, or to think about the experience in other disciplines of art. You have to read a good book. You have to see this exhibition. You have to read poetry. He even gave me an assignment to memorize poetry, one line every morning that I wake up. It didn't have to do anything to do specifically or directly with the music that we were learning, the way he presented it. But of course, now I see the huge benefit of it in just opening your imagination and the sensors that are the separator between art and all the rest, like entertainment or anything else that is that doesn't use so much the imagination component of what you're doing. What is the most important thing? Well, this is, again, it's a bit of a cliche, but the moment my son was born, I think the whole meaning of life for me took a shift. It is just a very strong, I guess, natural mechanism that just once I had this kid, this became the center of attention, of importance, and of meaning in life. And through this experience, I live my life. I experience everything else a little bit through these lenses. So things that I considered very important maybe are less important now, and vice versa. So I know it's for everyone who's a parent, it's a little bit a cliche response. And by all means, it's not, I don't think that everyone should have kids, and I'm not one of these preachers. But once you experience this, there's just a bigger natural force that is activated on you, and that makes sure that you take care of your kids, and it's very rewarding. And kind of, for me, opened a whole range of emotions that I was blind to before. So this is a major thing in my life, I think, which is also a very natural, maybe the most natural thing in the life. Everyone of us have or had a mother and a father, by definition. So it's the most normal thing, and at the same time the most wonderful thing. I feel very blessed to have, a wonderful team supporting my work, the managements that I have worked with, several managements in the different territories. The label I'm on, I feel particularly lucky and happy to work with a Deutsche Grammophon, which is kind of a symbol really in the classical music. And it's really not about the prestige, but also the people that work behind, all these projects. Every album that I made had so much conversation, and so much back and forth, and so many ideas flying in so many meeting rooms, in the label, and in restaurants, and in cafes, and there's a lot of one can think that the artist sits alone in the room and creates, but it's really many times about the team around you that helps you to focus, first and foremost, and to resonate the ideas that you have. And this is extremely, and also to deal with your insecurities, and kind of keep you authentic at the end. It's always a dance with this team, and I do feel very blessed because I play the mandolin, and this is unusual instrument. And when I started off my career, it was like there was no other mandolin player that made what I had in mind, what I wanted, what I aspired to. There was no one that played on international stages, on the Carnegie halls and on the Wigmore halls and on the Philharmonic around the world. But this is really where I wanted to point myself to. So there was a lot of resilience at the beginning from industry people when I was with the meeting in my early days with a manager, asking to be part of the roster or with the label. I mean, at the beginning it was very hard. Most of the people in the good case scenario would smile back and say like, it's very nice, we see your energy, good luck, and keep in touch, maybe one day. But you saw in their eyes that they were saying, in other words, like, yeah, we recognize your talent, but you play the mandolin, I don't know if you realize, and you're very nice, but it's not for us, and we don't think it can work on the mainstream classical industry. I got many of those, countless. And also, lucky for me, I also took all these no's as in a positive way, because I only saw this thing of like mandolin doesn't exist in the classical music mainstream world. I always saw it as an advantage, not as a disadvantage. Great. Then I have something, then I have a vacuum, then I have something that no one else has. Then there is something that people don't know yet. This is amazing especially for a traditional art form where what else can you make new? You cannot make a Brahms 4. Brahms 4 is Brahms 4. Vivaldi's music or Bach or Shostakovich is written already. What else can you bring new to the concert hall? So I always felt this is an advantage for me, and all these no's that I was getting from, promoters, labels, managers. Understand them. I never took it personally, completely understand, but it also was my fuel. I turned it into a drive, into I'll prove you wrong, down the line. But always with a smile. It never put me down. The opposite. It just lifted me up. And then those encounters with the very few people that said like, wow, this is actually interesting. I want to work with you. I want to support you. Then it was just two energies that meet and drive together. I had this with Deutsche Grammophon. From the first moment. They believed me, and they saw what I could see in my vision. And once we engaged these engines together, then it really gave me the push and the support that I really needed. Same thing with the managers I work now. And the first festivals then invited me. They didn't have to. It was a risk for them to invite a mandolin classical concert. But once this encounter with these people that saw something, they took the risk, they said like, yeah, we're gonna go with this. We're gonna go with this energy. We're gonna go with a mandolin, classical mandolin player. Then it had a lot of force and a lot of energy, and till today I'm very grateful for all these people, and we work together and we preserve this energy furthermore. Yeah, work-life balance. I really wish I had a recipe for that. I think a musician is really not, as one of my teachers said to me, and I really took it. Being a musician is not a profession, it's a way of life. And I really resonate with that, because music never ends. This is with being a musician, the music, the concerts, everything that is connected to this profession is the last thing I think of before falling asleep, and it's usually the first thing. Maybe not that dramatic, okay, but being a musician is the thing that you go to sleep with and you wake up with. It never has hours where you stop being a musician and start again being a musician. It's always, whether it's the preparation for it or evolving as an artist, developing your craft, which is an ongoing thing that happens all the time. Everything you experience, like I mentioned before, is part of it, it comes out after in the art, but also the most practical things like preparing for the next concert and of course traveling. It's like life and the work, the profession is kind of the same thing. This is what I feel being a musician is for me. There's not much of a separation. Of course, it was challenged now, interestingly enough, in the Corona time. And I remember that one of the first things when the pandemic started, one of the first things I felt was a relief, because I could rest, because I was realizing how intense my concert calendar was, what a toll the flights, not the music making, not being on stage, but the flights, getting from one place to another, kind of the workload, what a toll it took on me, how exhausting it was. While I was on tour, I didn't feel any of that, energized by it. But suddenly when I had the opportunity to take a break and do really nothing, it was interestingly pleasant. Shortly after comes a crisis, because it's my identity since ever I can remember myself. Since high school, I am the musician. This is how people experience me. This is how I experience myself. So there was this moment of like, wait, who am I now without the music, without the concert? What is my motivation to practice now? I couldn't understand it. It took me time, a certain time during the pandemic to kind of redefine myself, even to myself, and to find a way again. Okay, well, there are no concerts. Well, what am I doing? What's the purpose? Of course, this is normal, and so I think at the end, the average of all this kind of roller coaster pandemic time, there is something that I learned from me, that I took from me, that has that appreciates a little bit more kind of the work-life balance. I say it also when I know that I'm a bit cheating to myself, because then if my manager calls and says, this amazing concert they want you to play, I would my intuition would say yes, I want to do it. But I feel I'm more balanced, let's say. I'm more balanced after this sabbatical.